The O'Reilly Fact is on tonight.
I know that we're all going to make a deal on health care. That's such an easy one.
Brand new poll on how the folks see President Trump's role in the health care debacle. Talking points. We'll deal with it.
A warning from a state lawmaker on Facebook. Rep. Michelle Dubois posted a message reporting a rumored ICE raid that could happen today or tomorrow.
Do you think it's appropriate to post on Facebook?
I think it's appropriate. I think everything I've done is appropriate.
A lawmaker in Massachusetts tipping off illegal aliens about ICE raids. We'll talk to a sheriff about that. Also ahead, Lou Dobbs on Americans not being able to come up with $2,000 in a month. Also, Dennis Miller has a test. Are you a snowflake?
No, 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 no.
Caution. You are about to enter the no spin zone. The factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Brand new poll on President Trump, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. According to CBS News, the president's job approval rating now stands at 40%. 52% disapprove. 7% don't know. That's not surprising for a president with no prior political experience who's vowing to drain the swamp in Washington. This time next year, President Trump's job approval ratings will be much more meaningful. Next question, what do you think the main reason the Republican health care plan did not pass? Donald Trump didn't compromise enough, 14%. Congressional Republicans didn't compromise, 14%. Democrats didn't compromise, 14%. The bill just wasn't popular, 49%. So my analysis on Monday was correct. But I don't think the president is going to be blamed for this. So that's my opinion as a very astute analyst.
Look,
I don't think the wait. I don't think the folks out there are going, hey, Trump screwed this up. They're going, Congress screwed it up. And both parties did. Next question from CBS News. Do you think it's necessary for the FBI to investigate a possible link between the Trump campaign and the Russian government? 63% say necessary, 33% not necessary. Finally, do you think Donald Trump's offices were wiretapped during the presidential campaign? Very likely, 22%. Somewhat likely, 25%. Not very likely, 20%. Not likely at all, 30%. So the country's pretty much split down the middle on that question, mostly along ideological lines. Now, here's a question I would like posed to the American people. Do you believe that the hatred toward President Trump has reached a dangerous level in this country? The answer is yes. Whether you like the president or not, it's brutally unfair to try to undermine his administration, as some of the opponents are trying to do. We have the Democratic Party refusing to cooperate on anything. And now looks like Senate rules will have to be changed to appoint Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court because not enough Democrats will support the man. It's clear that Judge Gorsuch is qualified. It's also clear the most powerful Democrat in Congress, Senator Chuck Schumer, would look askance at any of his colleagues who support the judge. Many Democrat senators fear Mr. Schumer. As fair-minded people will concede, there was hatred toward President Obama. There was. But in the first months of his tenure, there was no apparent undermining of his administration. But now we have a climate of hatred where there are no rules. And the media feeds the beast every single day. As a historian, I can tell you I've never seen the national press despise a president more than they do Donald Trump. Richard Nixon might have come close at the end of his term, but what we have now is unfair and destructive for America. Hate should not be part of the political landscape. And that's a memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Sarasota, Florida, Geraldo Rivera. Here in New York City, Eric Bolling. What do you think is driving the hatred toward Trump?
Well, I think it's nothing new, first of all. I think the left stream media, which was completely caught off guard by the Trump win, had the hopes of having Hillary Clinton as the president, so they were angry, they were bitter, they were sore losers, and I think they've from day one, they've given Trump a hard time about everything he says and does, and don't give him a pass on anything. But I do let me call Donald Trump and the Trump administration out for one thing. I think on policy they deserve an A. I love everything that they're doing. On actual creating and saving jobs in the economy, he's crushing it. The jobs are staying. The numbers are fantastic. Consumer confidence, housing prices off the charts. So on policy and actual boots on the ground, what's going on in the economy, it's great. But he himself gave his communications department a C, and I think that contentious relationship between the media and the Trump communications department needs to get fixed before he starts getting a pass on some of the things that
all of that may be true and maybe not true, but that doesn't explain the personal animus. How do you think that has developed, Geraldo? The personal hatred toward Trump. You know Trump. You don't hate him. I know him. He's a likable guy.
You and I have known him for decades. Yeah. We've known him for decades. He's a very flamboyant personality, just like you and I are, Bill. And when you're a flamboyant personality and you are succeeding, people tend to stay out of your way and look at the great track record he has had with his primetime success and then the historic victory at the White House. But he has had some terrible stumbles. Yes, jobs are great, and he hasn't emphasized that enough. The economy, where is infrastructure now? Instead, what we've seen is this clumsy refugee ban that has done nothing but hurt tourism and scare people. Heavy-handedness in terms of the deportations of the undocumented immigrants. The health care. I don't blame President Trump, and I don't blame Speaker Ryan for the failure of the health care bill. What you had there was the knifing in the back, the treason, the treachery of the Freedom Caucus. What is the Freedom Caucus? It's 40 or so congressmen who are free from responsibility.
Policy. You're talking policy, and policy always has people disliking other people. This is personal. It's a personal thing. It transcends policy successes and failures. It transcends communication problems and tweets. They being the media, and then a lot of people, a lot of regular folks don't like him.
Yeah,
all right?
Well, the media
and so they can justify hatred and irrational behavior for an emotional reason. I don't know what that emotional reason is.
Of course you do, Bill.
No, I don't.
He does. He plays right into it. He loves that. He loves that fight with the media. He knows that the media has a
It's not just the media, though. It's folks, too.
How about when he himself, Donald Trump, goes to these big press conferences and just rips them apart? He's in his element. Those are his best moments. He thrives on the fight between himself and the media.
Reactive. Look, Geraldo, there are people in families who won't talk to each other because somebody voted for Donald Trump. I mean, this transcends John McCain versus Barack Obama or Mitt Romney.
I partially agree with both you and Eric in this regard. If he had succeeded, healthcare is a heavy lift. It is a complex problem. Paul Ryan and the Republicans crafted a reasonable compromise, as difficult as it was. If he had succeeded in getting that passed, after 8 years of promising to repeal and replace Obamacare, the buzz would have been much different. It's like instead of striking out in the bottom of the ninth inning in the seventh game of the World Series, he got the single, he scored the run.
Way beyond policy.
When you have that kind of personality, I disagree. You have policy and personality.
He lives for this battle. It doesn't hurt him at all. So the poll numbers may hurt him on poll numbers. Who cares about the polls?
I don't know how you say it doesn't hurt him.
He hasn't cared about the poll numbers for a year and a half, and he's smart. The people who like Donald Trump love the fight with the media. They love it. They eat it up.
I just think you guys are missing this. There is something about Donald Trump that has gotten deep into people's emotional makeup.
He's different. He's not a politician.
It's more than Barack Obama was different. All right.
He is a brash person who can only succeed with success. If he was a brash, broke businessman, that would be different than a brash billionaire. He has no cachet when he's losing. He's at 36% because he has had no success.
No, it's 40.
He hasn't emphasized his success.
How is he losing? Good Lord. Look at the economy. Look at the jobs. Look at everything. And by the way, I am askance that you didn't include me in knowing Trump for a long time, decades. And it's askance that you didn't call me flamboyant as you did both Bill O'Reilly and
Eric, you are growing into your flamboyance.
Bowling learned a new word here, askance. So we'll be hearing it 18 times on the 5 this week. All right, gentlemen, we appreciate it. Next on the rundown, big mayors conference today on sanctuary cities. We'll tell you what happened there. And later, Lou Dobbs on many Americans having no money. Dennis Miller has a snowflake quiz for us and a whole bunch of other stuff. Those reports after these. Impact segment tonight, the sanctuary city controversy getting hotter. Today in Washington, mayors from all over the country met with Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly discussing the sanctuary problem. Joining us now from Washington, Kelly Cohen, reporter for the Washington Examiner, who was there. So what's the headline of the meeting, Kelly?
So the headline is about less than 10 mayors. They're from these so-called sanctuary cities. They met with Department of Homeland Security Chief John Kelly to say, look, we're not breaking federal law, so you can't take away federal funds from us. And as we know, with the executive order in January, that was one of the threats, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions threatened that earlier this week. Look, if you continue sanctuary policies, you're going to lose federal money, federal grants.
Okay, so it's an unending debate. Certain cities and counties say we don't have to obey the detainer request from ICE, although everybody's pointing to Title 8 U.S. Code 1324. And it is pretty explicit that, let me read it to the audience because we're going to have another segment on this. It says that knowing or in reckless regard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection, such an alien in any place is against the law. So that if you're shielding them from a detainer, if you're not allowing and not holding after arrest, that seems to be in violation of this law. Did Kelly bring that up at all, do you know?
Well, the mayors, they said the issue is that detainers are voluntary. They're actually not backed by a warrant. So they're not backed by law. There's no lawful basis for an arrest.
Is there any data that says they're voluntary? I mean, I have the code right here. It doesn't say it's voluntary. Do you know of anything that's voluntary?
They're saying that because detainers are not, they're just that. They're a detainer. They're not backed by a warrant. They're saying they'll adhere to them if there is a warrant.
I know. But I don't know if a detainer is voluntary. I don't think it is legally. I mean, you can't arrest them, or I don't think you can arrest them here. That would be a pretty bold act. All right, Kelly, we appreciate it. Now let's go to Austin, Texas, a big sanctuary place, and bring in Carl Rove, who lives there. Travis County, where Austin is, being punished by the state and the feds. How do you see that, Mr. Rove?
Well, our local government, Austin is a blueberry in the midst of a big red sea. It's a very liberal town, and so you could expect them to adopt these kind of policies. What's interesting to me is that they want to have it both ways. As I understand it, the sheriff, Sally Hernandez, says, we'll ignore detainers, except if the detainer involves a case of capital murder, aggravated sexual assault, or continuous human smuggling. So, I mean, I guess if you just are smuggling once, we're going to ignore it. If you have an aggravated assault or a sexual assault that's not aggravated, we're going to ignore that. If you got manslaughter, if you got assault, if you're dealing drugs, you're selling opiates, you're selling heroin, that's not on our list. But if you give us a detainer on these four.
But where does Sally Hernandez get the right to make this law? I mean, that's what I asked yesterday. I mean, she's basically saying, look, I'm just going to do what I want, and I really don't care if the federal government wants to hold somebody. Remember, all we're talking about here are people who have been arrested. We're not talking about gardeners. We're not talking about anybody. These people have been arrested. They're in Sally Hernandez's jail, okay? Yeah. And then ICE finds out about it, not by Sally. Sally won't tell them. Okay, but finds out.
Well, Sally will. If they're a capital murder, aggravated sexual assault,
you're a heroin dealer, smuggling. And there's a few of those.
Well, that's not a serious crime, Bill. That's not a serious. We don't need to worry about that for the safety of our community. You think she's crazy? our county judge said, quote, "I am frustrated that Travis County resources and attention are continually diverted from public safety to address unfounded, politically motivated allegations." So is she saying that if you're accused of assaulting somebody or being a drunk and a DUI that kills somebody or a heroin dealer, that is a, quote, politically motivated allegation? I mean, that is just ludicrous.
Do people in your county where you live, Travis County, would the majority of them care about this? Are they outraged about it, or they just say, we're so liberal, we'll let anybody do what anybody wants to do?
Well, it's a pretty liberal place, so it's not likely to get the response that you would get elsewhere in Texas. Here's the problem for Travis County. Sally Hernandez was elected last fall. She took office, and she announced this policy late last year, just before the Texas legislature came to town for the 140 days every 2 years that it's here. So we have all of our Texas state House representatives and state senators here in town for a legislative session that goes through the end of May, and they're watching this drama play out. And as a result, our governor, our lieutenant governor, other state leaders have asked for legislation to deal with cities that refuse to uphold the law, and as a result, it's going to result in a very bad outcome for Travis County. And again, what gets me is okay, if you want to be principled, then say we're not going to accept any federal detainer. What gets me is they say, okay, no federal detainers except the 4 crimes that we have on our bad list. But if there are other bad crimes, we're not going to treat that detainer.
Yeah, I mean, that's anarchy. So what you're saying is that the state of Texas may make laws that would put Sally Hernandez in jail?
No, but it's likely to deny Travis County money and for failing to live up to its obligations, and that's hopefully going to have an impact on them. But I got to tell you, to me, it's got to be one or the other. You either respect the federal law and say we get a detainer for any violent crime and we're going to turn them over, or you simply say, you know what, we're not going to accept any detainer, we're going to find some goofy excuse not to accept it. But they're trying to have it both ways. They're trying to be pure to the liberal community.
Yeah, they hide behind a warrant situation, which is a very difficult thing to do. You've got to present evidence, and it takes forever, and all of this. So anyway, Mr. Rope, thank you. Directly ahead, a Massachusetts sheriff outraged that a lawmaker tipped off some illegal aliens about an ICE raid. And later, what are American troops doing in Syria? Very serious question. Up ahead. Personal Story segment tonight, an unbelievable situation in Massachusetts. Apparently a state representative there, Michelle Dubois, posted a Facebook thing that warned undocumented immigrants in the area there might be an upcoming ICE raid. That has caused all kinds of controversy. And joining us from Washington, Thomas Hodgson, Sheriff of Bristol County, Massachusetts, where this took place. What exactly did Ms. Dubois do?
Well, Bill, what she did was she sent out an alert saying she had got tipped off that there was going to be an ICE raid on Wednesday in the city of Brockton, and basically said, stay in your house, don't go outside. If somebody knocks on your door and you don't know who they are, don't answer the door. She gave out all kinds of instructions of what to do to avoid the ICE agents if they were to come into that area.
Did they indeed raid Brockton? Was there a raid?
I'm not aware of a raid at this point, but the underlying issue here is that we have an elected official who's gone out of her way not to protect the citizens of her community, but to harbor people who are targeted, and not only putting ICE agents at risk because we need the element of surprise. When we go to a place, if we're dealing with some heavy-duty transnational gangs involved in sex trafficking or the other things that are going on out there, we don't want to come up on some arsenal where they're prepared and seriously injure or kill any of our law enforcement people, never mind the crimes these people will get away with going down the road if she creates this.
Yeah, if she lets them get away. Now, in your experience, ICE is targeting criminals, not gardeners and house painters, right? And
no question about it.
All right. So Ms. Dubois is basically going to say, oh, no, I'm looking out for the poor chambermaids who don't deserve to be scrutinized. That's what she's going to say. Now, you pointed to, and I made reference to this in a previous segment, Title 8 U.S. Code 1324. Is Ms. Dubois in violation of the law, in your opinion, federal law, for doing what she did?
Well, if we could prove that she was able to assist somebody from getting away in the instance where ICE targeting somebody, and they can determine that this person, as a result of that, got away. I would say absolutely, but I'm not a lawyer, but I got to believe the law is clear.
You would say there could be a case made. Can there be a case made against sanctuary mayors in general who say, look, we're just not going to cooperate with federal law?
When they make an effort to consciously harbor or conceal someone, that's a felony under federal law, and they should be treated exactly the way their citizens or their constituents would be treated if they did the same thing when it comes to the consequences for that. So yes.
Okay. Now you live in a county south of Boston. You know Massachusetts is one of the most liberal states in the union, yet you yourself are opposite the prevailing wisdom in the Bay State. Your county people support you?
I've just been elected to my fourth 6-year term, Bill. I'm a Republican in the biggest Democratic enclave in Massachusetts. But that proves a point, which is the people around this country, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they want the laws enforced, and they want to know that their elected officials and their law enforcement people are upholding those laws.
So you're not getting any backlash or...
Oh, sure. Oh, sure I am.
Oh, you do?
I get backlash, but you know what? I've been getting backlash all through my career, and I don't worry about it because I got elected by the people, not by these politicians.
That's what I mean, though, not the politicians or the press, the folks you know, obviously speaks for itself 4 terms. Have you talked to Ms. Dubois? Have you interviewed her? Are you talking to her? Or?
No, she's had some things to say, I guess, publicly. I'm a hate monger, and I'm using her as a means to, you know, the typical thing you'd hear to avoid accountability or responsibility for what she did.
All right, Sheriff, we appreciate it very much. Thank you. Plenty more ahead as the factor moves along this evening. Lou Dobbs on Americans not having a lot of cash on hand. Dennis Miller on the snowflake culture. He's got a quiz for us. And Martha McCallum on U.S. troops in Syria, the most secret story around. We hope you stay tuned for those reports. Lose the Boss segment tonight. Troubling new study. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, about a third of American consumers say they'd have trouble coming up with an emergency $2,000 a month if they had to. So they just $2,000, and they give you 4 weeks to get it. They can't get it. Talk about living day to day. Here now to analyze Lou Dobbs. It's just shocking to me.
It is,
you know,
and it, you know, we look at all sorts of numbers. The unemployment rate. We're looking at the markets. I mean, you were $3 trillion higher since the election, yet a sizable number of Americans, a third of all consumers,
that's a lot.
$2,000 they can't come up with
in 4 weeks.
In 4 weeks, and what really puts this in perspective is to compare this to other countries, the OECD, developed nations. We rank 14th in household savings. That's how far we've fallen. Mexico has a higher savings rate and amount, absolute dollars as well as rate, over the United States. It's stunning.
Why is that? Why do Americans not save? Why are we 14?
I think that part of that is we've gone through an extraordinarily difficult period that we have emerged from. The other part is we are offshoring our production, our plants, our factories. We are outsourcing our jobs.
You just think it's a matter of wages that they don't save?
I think
Isn't it a matter of lifestyle, though?
It's also partially lifestyle.
Immediate gratification, running up credit card debt?
I mean, you could talk about consumer behavior, and certainly that's right. It also is bank behavior. When you're talking about 24% rates on credit cards, Bill, that's usury by any definition.
You have a credit card with 24%.
I'm sorry?
You have to be a moron to have a credit card with 24%. You can get it lower than that.
You can, but you know what? We've got a lot of people who don't. And the fact is that it is the system working, but I'll tell you, it's a system that favors banks and not the consumer. You know, particularly the poor consumer.
Benjamin Franklin was a thrifty guy.
He was indeed.
And poor rich is on.
We were a thrifty nation.
We were, and then we hit somewhere in the Roaring '20s was a really, you know, started to go down, spending everything, and then the Depression hit, and then nobody had anything at all. But when I was growing up, and this ties into the old school philosophy, I was taught, you know, okay, you're making $1.30 at Carvel.
Right.
The government's taking 6 50 cents out of that. So you're coming home with 85 cents an hour, and then you got to save half of that.
You've got to save it, and that's and save for a rainy day. All of the old cliches that are absolutely true.
But that's not.
But in the
anymore.
1960s, something happened. A great deal happened, as you know, in the culture of this country. We became the throwaway nation. We became the charge nation. Credit cards were everywhere. The cashless society was envisioned. It's here. And what it leaves out are people who cannot, once people are offshoring their jobs and production, outsourcing their jobs and the American dream, there is about a third of the American people who are getting desperately, horribly shortchanged.
All right. So you're saying it's more about generating income than foolish money management.
I think it's both.
All right. Because I think it's the latter. I think if you want to make some money in this country, you might have to move.
You can.
You might have to drive an Uber.
But if you're one of
you can make it.
But see what's happening here with this move back of the car companies to Detroit.
I got it. But
it's going to be very helpful.
I always did something. When it was manual labor, but I did it when I was coming up, so I think it can be done now. Lou Dobbs, everybody, Miller's on deck. Mother thanks the cops for arresting her daughter. Also, Miller's great snowflake quiz. The D-Man, moments away.
REILLY Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly in the Miller Time segment tonight. A quiz. Are you a snowflake? As you may know, my new book, Old School, Life in the Sane Lane, deals with that question. So we asked Dennis Miller from his perch in Santa Barbara. Come up with a few queries of his own on the topic. So Miller, lay question number 1 on us.
By the way, Billy, when you worked at Carvel, Cookie Puss still had his baby teeth, all right?
It was a long back.
Number 1. The first question I would ask a kid who wanted a job is I'd say, what are you, crazy or stupid wanting to work for a living with all the freebies out there? First thing I'd ask. Number 2, this is how I'd reveal a snowflake. Does it upset you that Roy Rogers named his horse Trigger? Trigger. Number 3, is good morning a microaggression against people who like to sleep in? Number 4, if you deem someone to not be as loving as you, do you then hate them? Number 5, boxers or brief attention span? Number 6, how much are you going to sue me for making you take this quiz? Number 7, are you too lazy to get restless leg syndrome? Number 8, would you take a summer job as a safe space lifeguard? Number 9, is disagreement with you immoral? And number 10, be you old school or a snowflake, Pelosi's a moron, right?
That's a trigger. You just triggered the snowflake. You can't say moron. You can't make a judgment, Miller, in the snowflake culture.
That's what I'm saying, Billy. Pelosi is the unifying point. We can all come together in this culture over one thing. It's the only thing we still agree on. She's a moron.
All right, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I know you wouldn't, but I would say it twice for me and you.
Now, you live in a very affluent part of Southern California, which there is snowflakes all over the place. And I know your philosophy is to basically ignore them. You don't confront them, correct?
Billy, I go out the door, I start counting the seconds till I get back inside the gate. It's crazy. All right? There are shut-ins that get out more than me. So I go out, it's like a covert mission. I go out, I get some mint Milanos, I get some milk, I sneak back into the compound, and I shut the gate behind me.
Can you tell on the streets of Santa Barbara, nice little town, can you tell if there are snowflakes approaching? Can you just tell by the appearance?
Well, there's a lot of guys on Lower State Street who urinate on themselves, so I can point out the yellow snowflakes. Hey, listen, by the way, Karl Rove has got to only put numbers on that white thing. He's getting silly with it. It's like, I like gummy bears. I wish my name was Sammy Ray. I am bald. Tell him to put math up on there, not anything.
Just stats, right? Not editorial comments, just stats. Okay.
Rove is turning into a snowflake. I wish my name was Sammy Ray.
Now, when did you know you were old school?
I don't know, Billy. I've always, certain things I'm almost anarchistic about. But certain things are just common sense. I'm not one of those people who finds common sense too common. It just seems basic to me. Like if somebody comes up to me and they go, we're going to give Iran like billions of dollars, I go, I don't think that's a good idea. That doesn't feel like old school to me. That feels like school still standing. I don't want the school to be vaporized.
Right. You tell a story about your mother when you were leaving your Pittsburgh suburban home. She gave you advice when you were going out to the West Coast. You can't use the obscenity that your mom put into the presentation. You remember what I'm talking about here? Don't be...
Yeah, but don't be an a-hole.
That was your mother's advice. That's kind of old school advice.
It was really old school advice. And you know what, Billy? I'm touched by mothers who do that rough thing with their kids. I saw an article about a woman who wrote a thank you letter to a cop somewhere. Have you seen that story?
Walton County, Florida.
Yeah, I'm touched by that woman. She's trying to save her kid's life. We have overpraised a whole generation of kids to the point where we haven't life-proofed them. We're raising a generation of emotional hemophiliacs who are all too eager to throw their bodies on the tepid grenade of minor insult. Buck up, kids. Don't be snowflakes.
This is what happened. A 19-year-old girl was arrested during spring break at a popular beach resort on the Gulf. And... the drinking age is 21, and she's 2 years below that. So her parents were notified, and her mother sent a thank you note to the sheriff's office for arresting her daughter, saying, look, we let her go. We told her that she had to behave. She promised she wouldn't drink. She drank. Thank you for arresting her. Maybe she'll wise up.
Well, you got to watch yourself out there when you're a kid. So I think the mother appreciated that, because when you're out there on spring break in Florida, you have all sorts of guys coming up to you saying, hi, I'm Karl Rove.
I don't know if that's on the beach.
Hi, I'm Karl Rove.
On that note, Miller, we're going to let you go. And Martha McCallum's on deck, U.S. troops in Syria. Very secret story. Martha with the details. Next. Back in the book segment tonight, did you see that? Senator from New Mexico, Tom Udall, saying the United States has committed an act of war against Syria.
In Syria, the U.S. has not been invited by the government. U.S. military vehicles and heavy artillery have been seen in Syria. And it's easy to argue the United States has effectively invaded northern Syria, violating the sovereignty of a country in the Middle East, which is a de facto declaration of war.
Was now to further explain the anchor of the first 100 days, Martha McCallum. So number one, Senator Udall would not come on the program to discuss his point of view. Number two, we the United States Special Forces, to fight ISIS. All right, which is a borderless war because they run all around, and now they're in Syria and Iraq. Number three, does Udall oppose that? He doesn't want to chase ISIS?
Absolutely. I mean, he has actually been fighting for an authorization of the use of military force. He doesn't want us to add to any troops on the ground there, that to answer your first question. But what this deals with is the authorization of the use of military force.
Right.
And he has asked a couple of times in 2013 and 2015, and he's had a Republican partner on that, Senator Lee, to go to Congress to get the money to authorize that, which he would vote against. But he's saying that we have no right to be there because it hasn't been authorized by Congress.
Yeah, and when we went into Iraq, that was authorized by Congress under Bush the
Actually, they've been on the same AUMF since 9/11.
AUMF, what does that mean?
The authorization of the use of military force.
Very impressive.
Okay, so we've been on the same one
because it is the war on terror.
9/11. It's all about the war on terror.
Right.
President Obama went under that same one. He tried to get additional support from Congress, but they never wanted to vote on it.
Yep.
So this has been going on for years and years.
So
and
Udall wants a new updated vote. But I don't understand why Udall, and I wish he would come on. I mean, you know, if you're going to do this stuff, Senator, have a little cojones here and come on and explain. Why doesn't he want the United States and other nations, because it is a coalition in Syria, to fight ISIS? I mean, what doesn't he want that?
Because he believes it will just deepen our engagement in another war like Afghanistan that he believes would be useless and would never end. So he's saying, you know, bring it before Congress, and he wants to vote it down. So he's saying the president has no right to have these troops on the ground in Syria.
In Senator Udall's mind, all right, we shouldn't confront ISIS in the Middle East at all.
He doesn't want it. He doesn't.
How about bombing? Can we bomb them or no?
No, he does not
nothing.
Want, he especially doesn't want any additional troops on the ground. We're there in support of Syrian forces, as you know.
Well, no. Let's be clear. We're not there in support of Syrian forces. We're there in support of Syrian rebel forces.
Exactly.
Assad.
On the side that we are on.
Right.
It's extremely complicated.
But I'm just fascinated by
those who are fighting for independence from
I just wonder if New Mexicans understand that your senator doesn't want a confrontation militarily with ISIS at all. I mean, does that sit well with you? Just a question.
I mean, just to point out, these are the same people who did not want to do anything after the red line was crossed. So hundreds of thousands of Syrians have lost their lives while we've stood aside. Now that there are some civilian casualties, there's an outrage that has been stepped up by people like Senator Udall.
Okay, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, huge concern. 13-year-old boy was patted down aggressively, and now everybody's angry. Roll the tape.
I honestly felt like we were being targeted. We were being treated like dogs.
I've always been like really sensitive to people touching me, and whenever he touched me, I started having hives a little bit.
So what happened there?
They went through, they were detained for an hour at the TSA. And
the mother and the daughter?
The family. They had a laptop and a backpack that they didn't take out. You know, everybody's very touchy, so to speak, about taking all of these things out and doing the proper procedure. They may have, you know, ticked off the TSA in this case, and maybe they were harder on them because of that. That still remains to be seen. But here are the images of this boy. Now everybody gets the same pat down, essentially. There is one form. They've sort of standardized it because TSA has gotten all kinds of bad press for, you know, tests when weapons get through and bomb-making material gets through when they're doing fake tests of those things. So now they have some new standards. They implemented them on this young child. And, you know, judgment is basically seen as a way to profile, right? Like if these people pick who they want to choose to pat down or to give extra surveillance to, they're seen as basically profiling.
Yeah, so this looks ridiculous to me.
It's totally ridiculous.
Don't you think this is ridiculous?
Totally ridiculous. This boy is obviously not posing any threat. Neither is his family. But they subjected him to a 2-minute pat down, even though he said...
Oh, it's the federal government. That's for sure. You got rule. Look, oh no, what do we got there?
And the supervisor watched the whole thing to make sure that he was going according to procedure. I mean,
so wrong.
Just ridiculous.
So wrong. Okay, Martha McCallum, everyone. Check her out at 7 p.m. Eastern Time every night. Fact tip of the day, another good thing Fox News Channel has accomplished. The tip, moments away.